Hello again and welcome back. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to do this popular alternative to a granny square. This is the African Flower Hexagon. It's a great stash buster. You can use up all those bits of leftover yarn from other projects. In this example that I've got here, I picked the colours completely random. The only thing that I tried to do was make sure that no two was exactly the same, and I have a different colour for the centre, for the petals, as well as a different colour for the petal edges. The only thing that needs to be the same colour is your final round, and it's important that you do your final round all in the same colour, because when you come to put it together it'll look better. If you had different colours in your final round, it would look a bit of a mess when you put it together, especially from one side. I've also crocheted this together on the back using the same colour yarn, and so it's double-sided really. If you prefer the crocheted side, you can use that. If you prefer the flat side, which I do, you can use that. In this example you can see how the hexagon is made up. The first part is a circle into which we have worked 6 pairs of trebles, and they're separated by a chain. The second and third round are in the same colour, and they're worked together. The third round, the edging, is quite straightforward, and the fifth round, which is again a round of trebles, and this one is in the colour of our border. I prefer to work by doing a batch of maybe 6 of the centres, followed by a batch of 6 of round 2 and 3, and then do a batch of the outlining of the petals. And I do this because it's easy to remember where I'm up to then. If you do your first round and then you move on to your second and your third and your fourth, etc., it can get quite confusing because there's a lot of different stitches involved. Also, being a hexagon, when you come to sew it together, you will find that you need half hexagons to get a straight edge. Now, it's perfectly alright if you don't want a straight edge, just to connect the hexagons together. However, it's worth noting that there are 2 different edges. There's a particular shape for the side, and a different shape again for the top, and this is because of the way that hexagons fit together. So this one has got 3 edges, and this one's actually got 4 edges. If you look closely, there's 4 edges, and each of those I'll show in a different video. In the project I'm currently working on, you'll notice that I've done the centre of the flower and the edges of the petal in the same colours. Now I'm going to continue this in this project, but you don't have to. You can do completely random colours if you wish. The only one that it's important that you keep the same is your outside border. So before you start your project, just make sure that you have got enough yarn of that colour to complete your project. I'm working with a double knit yarn and a 4mm hook. I'm going to create a slip stitch and put that on my hook. And to start with, I'm going to chain 6. And I'm going to join it with a slip stitch in the first stitch to create a ring. I'm then going to chain 3 to create a false treble and work a treble into the centre of the ring. So that's the first of our 6 pairs of trebles. Then I'm going to chain 1 and work 2 more trebles in there. Chain 1 and 2 more trebles, So we've got 3 pairs of trebles. It's not particularly easy to see, but they are separated by a chain. So I'm going to chain 1 and do another pair of trebles. So that's 4 pairs of trebles. Chain 1 and another pair of trebles. Chain 1 and our final pair of trebles. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pairs of trebles, and to finish off I'm just going to chain 1, going to slip stitch into the top of the chain 3 of the false treble, and then yarn over and pull through to fasten off. Just pull that tight. And that's the centre of our flower. For round 2 we're going to work into each of the chain spaces, and each of the chain spaces we're going to make the base of the petals. These consist of 2 trebles, chain 2 and 2 trebles, with a chain to get over to the next chain 1 space. So I'm going to fasten on. And I'm going to chain 3, and this will make a false treble. However, I'm not going to do a treble straight afterwards, because this is going to be the second treble of this petal base. The reason being is when we come back round we're going to put a final treble just before it, and it will bring us into the right position to move up. So now if it's 2 trebles, chain 2 and 2 trebles, then we need to chain 2. So that's a total of chain 5. So it's a false treble, a chain 2, and we can put the final 2 trebles into that chain space. Sounds complicated to start with, but it will make sense because it puts us in the right place to move up to the next round. So to move over to the next space we're going to chain 1, find the next chain space and put 2 trebles in there. And then we're going to chain 2. This is going to make the corner of the hexagon more pronounced, and then 2 trebles back into the same chain space. So that's the base of the petal. So we're going to move over to the next chain space. So I'm going to chain 1, do 2 trebles into the next chain space, it's a little bit fiddly where we finished off, chain 2 and 2 more trebles back into that chain space. And we're going to continue that all the way around. So I'm going to chain 1 to move to the next chain space, put 2 trebles in there, chain 2 and 2 more trebles. Chain 1 to move to the next chain space, 2 trebles, chain 2 and 2 more trebles. Chain 1 to move to the next chain space, 2 trebles, chain 2 and 2 trebles. And then we're back to the first space. As you can see, we've got our 2 trebles there, we've got a chain 2 and a chain 3, which is a false treble, so we need another treble in there. So we're going to chain 1 to get us across to that chain space, put our last treble in there, and we're going to slip stitch in the 3rd chain up. However, we're not going to fasten off because we're going to use the same colour to continue on round 3. Now looking at that, you should be able to see a clear hexagon, and it's worth counting round to make sure that first of all you've got 6 sides, but that you've got 2 trebles and a chain 2 in each space. We're going to be working into the chain 2 spaces, and in each of those we're going to put 7 trebles. So we're going to start off chaining 3 to make a false treble. You can see now that this has moved us across to be in the chain space, which is why we did the false treble as the 2nd treble, not the 1st. So into that chain space we're going to put 6 more trebles to make 7, so that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, and it's just worth counting to make sure that we have got 7. And then into the single chain space we're just going to slip stitch, and that acts to pull the trebles down and make it more of a petal shape. So we're now working into this chain 2 space, and we're going to put 7 trebles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. And again it's worth just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to make sure that we've got 7, and then slip stitch into the single chain space. Again, so you can see the petal shapes forming now. So we're going to continue that all the way around. So into the chain 2 space we're going to do 7 trebles, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Slip stitch into the chain 1 space and work 7 trebles into the next chain 2 space. To finish that round, we're just going to slip stitch into the final chain 1 space, and we're going to slip stitch into the top of the chain 3, the false treble that we did at the start, and then just chain 1 and fasten off. For the next round I'm going back to my original colour, but you can use any colour of your choice. And we're going to work in between the stitches in this round. So I'm just going to put my hook in between, and I'm going to join the original colour back on. We're going to do double crochets into each of the stitches. Now normally you would chain 1 to start with, this we don't, we just go straight in and do a double crochet, or in between the next stitch, do another double crochet, and so on. Here, I'm going to do a double crochet into that point there, and then we come to this part, which is where we did our slip stitch into the chain 1 space, and we're going to do a long double into that. So keep this quite loose, you don't want to be too tight, and then a double into the next stitch, and continue that way all the way around. Just going between the stitches and doing a double crochet. So we're back there to the slip stitch, so we're going to do a long double down into the row below, and this just helps define the shape of the petals a little bit more. So we're back again to do a long double down to separate off the petals. It's a little bit awkward to get between. So now I'm coming towards the end. I'm doing my last long double crochet, working into the stitch at the side, and I'm working between the next two stitches, and this is where we started, and I'm just going to slip stitch into there, chain one and fasten off. There we have our flower just waiting for its final border. The next round is the border round, which is made up of trebles. And there's 8 trebles per petal. And we have 2 trebles in the very top stitch, separated by a chain 1. Where we move across from one petal to another, it may look like there's a chain space, but there isn't. It is just a straight treble back into the next one. This border takes it from being a flower shape back to being a hexagon. And we have to take a little care where we start off. So if we look at each of the petals, the fan on the petals, there's 7 trebles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and on top of the 4th one is where we're going to put the 2 trebles and the chain. So 1, 2, 3, that's the stitch we're going to be going into. So we need to identify that stitch and work back 3. So 1, 2, 3. That's where we're going to join our border colour. So to start off, we're going to make a false treble by chaining 3. And then we're going to do treble in the next stitch. That gives us 2 trebles. A treble in the 3rd stitch. And then we should be at the top. So in the top we're going to do a treble, a chain 1 and a treble. And this will be the corner of the hexagon. So down the other side of the petal we're going to put a treble in the next 3 stitches. And then we're going to move directly over to the next petal. So we've got to identify the 4th stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, and count back 3. 1, 2, 3. And that's where we do our next treble. So that's 1, 2, 3, and the 4th should be the centre of our petal, and we're going to do a treble, chain 1 and a treble back into the same stitch. You can see there that it's starting to go back to a straight edge. So we're going to continue down the next side with trebles in the next 3 stitches. So that's 1, 2 and 3. And we're going to identify the centre stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's that one, the 4th one. Count back 3. And put our next treble in. Don't forget, we don't chain between the petals, we just continue on. Even though it looks like it's a chain space, it's just directly into trebles. 2, 3, and the 4th one is our centre point, so we put a treble, a chain and a treble in the same stitch. And then down the other side with trebles in the next 3 stitches. This next part is where we actually finished off, and sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to see where your stitches are. You sometimes end up with an extra looking stitch. So 1, 2, 3, that's 4. So that's the centre. We've got 1, 2 and 3 there. So we're going to do a treble straight into there. If you get confused because of the loops, because sometimes there seems to be an extra loop, just have a look at the fan and work just above one of the arms of the fan. So we've done 3, so that should mean that that's our 4th. So we do a treble, a chain and a treble, and then work a treble into the next 3 stitches down. Now you can see that if your work's consistent, between the petals you will have 3 stitches, and as long as I've counted correctly and I've been consistent in the way I've pumped my doubles, I don't need to identify the centre, I can just work from them. When you're first starting out, it's very wise to count back on each petal, but after a while you'll soon get the hang of it and you'll be able to do it this way. So I'm at the top again, so I'm going to chain 1 and put another treble in that stitch, and then another treble into the next 3 stitches down. I'm going to skip those stitches and work into there. This doesn't work out if you haven't got the correct amount of stitches underneath. So if you find that it doesn't seem to be working for you, that's possibly why you may have done 6 trebles on the end of the petal instead of 7. I'm at the top, so I'm going to chain 1 and do another treble in the same stitch, and then treble in the next 3. This sometimes throws people because it looks like they've made a mistake, because they have nowhere else to go now, but it's literally just a case of slip stitching into the top of your false treble, the chain 3, chain 1 and fasten off. And that's your first hexagon. All that remains to do now is to weave in all the ends, and I will pre-warn you now, each hexagon has 8 ends that needs weaving in. So if you're averse to weaving in, this may be not the project for you. Some people like to block their hexagons. However, I just stack mine up and I find that that keeps them flat enough. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for the rest of the parts of this tutorial. In the next videos I'm going to be showing you how to do the 2 different shaped half hexagons.